Hi, Greg here for Party Foul. I got Scott behind the camera again, and we're going to talk about digging deep, utility, solo, and important model removal. And I think that you should, first off, you should know your tools. You should know what models are good at removing utility solos and utility models that your opponent might have. And you should try to include some of them in every list. Not every list it's capable of having that. I play an Axis Tier 4 list, and that has like almost zero utility removal. Know your tools. The type of tools that you can have at your disposal that can easily, or at least hopefully with some difficulty, remove troublesome solos and utility models like Iris, Killer, and Gorman are ranged attacks. And we've got a number of models here. Some of them have ranged attacks, some of them have direct range attacks, and some of them have blast range attacks, and some of them have spray range attacks. All of those are good utility removal. Know your target, know which one's going to be best. Also, spells and arc nodes are great ways of doing utility solo and utility model removal. I found that usually in the first 2 turns of the game, some of my casters have excess focus, or can have excess focus depending on the matchup, and I can usually throw that into a boosted what do you want to call it, arcane bolt, or whatever you want to call those poor man's damage spells, like arcane bolt, dissolution bolt, all those sort of things that are usually strong enough when they're boosted to take out a utility solo, especially if your opponent's been overly aggressive with them. And almost every caster has one of those spells that are usually like a POW 11 or a POW 12 that can be good for that. Besides that, there are some melee options for removing utility solos. Those can be tramples, either trampling over the model or trampling to the model, side steps, two-handed throws, fast solos with parry or acrobatics. Those can also help you remove utility solos and utility models at some point in the game, usually not early on, later on in the game. So, those are your tools. Now you need to know your target. What is important? Solos, Iris and Gorman, synergy and utility units like Necrosurgeons or Pain Givers or Optifex Directive, or anything that helps do like some sort of global boosting or anything like that. Something that gives bonuses to other units that's going to greatly improve their damage output. And things like caster attachments, Jack Marshals, and Juniors. You should be able to look across the table and quickly decide what is critical to your opponent's game plan. And not only what's critical to your opponent's game plan, but what's forward enough for you to reach with the tools that you have available. 3, you have to know your target's defensive tech. What is the nature of the target's defense, and do you have the necessary counters to eliminate it? There's a number of ways that they can have defenses. First is high defense, and that can be augmented by camouflage, Iron Sentinel, all that sort of stuff. Second is stealth, which can also be provided by prowl. So make sure that you ask ahead of time, does that model have stealth? Does it have prowl? That type of thing. Third is sack pawn or shield guard. And they both only work against ranged attacks, not against magical attacks. So that's why stuff like Dissolution Bolt and Arcane Bolt and stuff like that can be great at removing utility solos and things like Necrosurgeons and that, because your opponent may think that they're safe because that can be shot by guns, but not by magic missiles. And fourth is damage immunity. Know your target's damage immunity. Like Gorman, he's immune to a lot of damage types. Don't shoot him with something that's fire and then realize that you just wasted a 10-point activation. Don't do that. So, fourthly, how to execute and when to execute. Probably most importantly is don't telegraph your intent to remove those models. Try to wait to the right time to ask specific questions about models' defensive stats or defensive tech, because that can really telegraph your intent to eliminate them. At the beginning of the game, you could say, can I just see your cards? Just to see all of them and flip through, take a look at it. Just don't, make sure your opponent doesn't realize it, because you want him to be a little careless with his utility solos, or be overly aggressive with them. B, prioritize. Look at the utility solos and utility models that your opponent has, and realize which ones have to die and how much you're willing to sacrifice to do it. Sometimes trampling a 6-point heavy over to kill a Necrosurgeon may help win you the game and may be worth that sacrifice. C, Be patient and don't throw your diggers away. And what I mean by diggers is models that are capable of reaching out and touching those models. And that includes, like, if the model has stealth and you have ranged models without any stealth outs, that's not a digger. That's not a digger in that opportunity. But your arc nodes, like your Lancer, your algorithmic dispersion optifex and stuff like that, don't throw them away early in the game if you're going to need them later to remove Iris or Gorman or something like that. Fifthly, how do you protect your utility solos and your utility models? First off, line of sight. That can be kind of important. Most attacks, there are some, but most attacks cannot target you if they can't see you. So keep them behind a forest, keep them behind other models, keep them out of sight. Still be aware if your opponent has a ground pounder or an arc node that can run around the side or something like that, but line of sight is a big thing. B is shield guard or sack pawn. If you have those abilities, make sure you have sufficient models nearby to handle the incoming threats. So if you have a Necrosurgeon, make sure you have an abundance of Mechanothralls or Stitch Thralls to take shots if you're facing Cygnar or something like that. And lastly is distance. A lot of these sort of utility solos, like Gorman and Iris, well, Iris, not Gorman, have advanced deployment. That doesn't mean you put them up as far as they can and take as much table as you can with them. That's not the role. You have to know what you want out of them and know when to put them in. Putting them up the table too far can sometimes mean that your opponent can run an arc node up and eliminate that very crucial solo early on in the game. You don't want that to happen, so keep your distance. So that's digging deep. I think it's a important step in your development as a War Machine player to be able to look across the table, identify those key pieces that you need to eliminate as early as possible, and to look at your own models and know which ones are crucial in that endeavor and to hold them until that opportunity arises. So, enjoy.